Welcome back. Before you drift off, if you enjoy these stories, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel more than you know. Now, let's begin. A young bartender from a Pennsylvania pub vanished after closing time on a Saturday night, leaving behind a void that consumed everyone who knew him. But 6 years later, inside a room at a nearby motel, exterminators discover a sinister secret hidden beneath the carpet. It is a discovery that would be connected to the missing bartender in the most unexpected way, and reveal a nightmare far more twisted than anyone could have imagined. The Pennsylvania. Countryside blurred past Liam O'Connell's windshield as he navigated the winding roads toward Havenwood. His 2003 Honda Accord had been running for over an hour since he'd left his solitary home outside the county, the engine humming steadily beneath the hood. The November afternoon was crisp and clear. Typical for the 2005 autumn season, his phone buzzed insistently on the passenger seat. The caller ID showed Detective Eva Rostova's number, a sequence of digits he'd memorized over the past 6 years. He flipped it open with one hand while keeping his eyes on the road. "Detective Rostova," he answered, trying to keep the anticipation. Out of his voice, "Liam, where are you now?" Her voice was professional, but carried an undertone of urgency that made his pulse quicken. "Just entered Havenwood. I'm about 15 minutes from the station." He slowed as he passed the welcome sign, its painted letters cheerfully declaring Havenwood, heart of Pennsylvania Dutch country. "Change of plans. Can you meet me at the Willow Creek Motel instead? It's not far from the station, maybe 10 minutes. Take Route 83 east, then turn north on Oak Ridge Road. You'll see it on your right. You can't miss the neon sign." Liam's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "What's this about, Detective? I'll explain when you get here. I'll be waiting at the entrance." The line went dead. Liam closed the phone and set it back on the seat, his mind racing. It had been for years since he'd last seen Detective Rostova in person. Though they'd spoken on the phone periodically about Sean's case, his younger brother had vanished 6 years ago, seemingly into thin air, leaving behind only questions and a grief that had hollowed out their family. Following the detective's directions, he found the Willow Creek Motel easily enough. It was a typical roadside establishment. 2 stories of faded blue doors facing a cracked parking lot. The neon sign flickered intermittently, the WN Creek struggling to stay lit. Several police cruisers were parked haphazardly near one of the ground floor units, their presence drawing a crowd of curious onlookers. Liam parked his Honda away from the commotion and stepped out, scanning for the detective. He spotted her immediately. Ava Rostova hadn't changed much in 4 years. Her auburn hair was pulled back in the same practical ponytail, her navy blazer as crisp as ever. She was speaking with a uniformed officer, but looked up as he approached. "Liam," she said, extending her hand. "Thanks for coming so quickly." He shook it, noting the firm grip. "What's going on here?" "Follow me." She led him through the gathering crowd. Motel guests in various states of dress clustered in the corridor, craning their necks to see into the open door of room 6. Staff members in burgundy uniforms whispered among themselves. Detective Rostova's presence parted them like a ship through water. Inside the unit, the scene was controlled chaos. Crime. Scene technicians photographed every surface while uniformed officers kept a perimeter. The room itself was standard motel fare, a dated floral bedspread, particle board furniture, and the lingering scent of industrial cleaner, failing to mask years of transient occupation. Hernandez, Detective Rostova, called to a woman in a maid's uniform standing near the door with a nervously looking man and a manager's name tag. "This is Liam O'Connell. Can you explain what you found?" The maid, whose name tag read Maria, wrung her hands as she spoke. "I was deep cleaning the room. We do it every few months when we have vacancies. I noticed moths coming from under the carpet near the window. Lots of them. So Mr. Davies here called the exterminator company." The manager, Davies, picked up the story. When the exterminators started to roll back the carpet to check for an infestation, they found... He gestured toward the corner of the room where several technicians were working. Liam moved closer and felt his stomach drop. On the exposed wooden flooring, someone had drawn an elaborate symbol in what appeared to be black paint or marker. It was a pentagram enclosed in a circle, with smaller symbols at each point. Dark stains, unmistakably old blood, spotted other areas of the floor, though not directly near the symbol. "What does this have to do with Sean?" Liam asked, his voice tight. "My brother was a devout Christian. He would never... ... Detective Rostova held up an evidence bag. "We ran a preliminary DNA test on the blood. The field test matched it to your brother's profile from our database. We had his DNA on file from personal items, his toothbrush and comb that you provided 6 years ago." Liam stared at the bag, trying to process this information. "The blood is 6 years old, and you're certain the test is accurate. Field tests aren't 100%, but they're reliable enough for us to proceed." She held up another evidence bag, this one containing a black cord with a pendant. "We also found this." Through the plastic, Liam could see a simple Christian cross, the kind sold in religious bookstores throughout Pennsylvania. It was tarnished with age, but still recognizable. Detective Rostova turned the bag so he could see the back of the cross. Etched into the metal in small, precise letters was Sean Matthew O'Connell, June 15th, 1999. "That's his full name," Liam said slowly. "But the date. That's not his birthday, not his baptism date either. I don't know what that date means." "Necklace matches the description in our files. You confirmed 6 years ago that he often wore a cross pendant." "Yes, but I never really looked at the back, never saw this date." Liam handed the evidence bag back, his hands unsteady. "Is there anything else? Any other sign of him?" "Not yet." "We're still processing the scene." Detective Rostova studied him carefully. "Liam, what do you make of that symbol?" He looked again at the pentagram on the floor. "It's obviously a cult. Satanic, probably. Are there groups like that around here?" The detective exchanged glances with another officer. "Pennsylvania is deeply religious, Havenwood especially. We've had reports of some occult activity among college students. It's mostly harmless stuff, kids playing at being rebellious. There are a few groups, but nothing we've been able to act on. No criminal activity we could prove. Did Sean ever mention anything like this? Any strange groups? People who might have had a problem with him?" "No, never. He kept to himself mostly, just worked weekends at that pub." Liam paused. "What about his boss, the pub owner, out of town currently? We're trying to reach him?" Detective Rostova turned to the motel manager. "Mr. Davies, I need this room sealed. No one goes in or out without police authorization, and I strongly recommend you install security cameras. The lack of surveillance footage is going to make this investigation much harder." Davies nodded vigorously. "Of course, Detective. Whatever you need." She turned back to Liam. "I need to coordinate with my team, re-interview all the staff who were working 6 years ago. We'll need to track down anyone who's left employment here since then." She paused, her expression softening slightly. "Why don't you get some rest? We'll handle the investigation from here." "I think I'll stay in town for a few days," Liam said. "See if I can help somehow." She handed him some paperwork. "I'll need you to sign these, confirming the identification of the personal effects. And Liam, I'm sorry we're meeting again under these circumstances." He signed where indicated and returned the forms. As he left the room, he passed the manager calling his staff together for police questioning. At the front desk, Liam booked a room for the night, his mind still reeling from what he'd seen. The desk clerk processed his credit card efficiently, then hurried off to join the other staff. Alone in the lobby, Liam noticed a rack of tourist brochures. One caught his eye: Havenwood Nightlife. Among the listings was the Keystone Tap Room. Noting it opened at noon daily, checked his watch. 2:30 p.m., the pub where Sean had worked, where he'd spent his last weekend before disappearing. Liam pocketed the brochure and headed for his car. The Keystone Tap Room sat on a corner lot, its weathered brick facade and neon beer signs marking it as a local institution. Liam pushed through the heavy wooden door, letting his eyes adjust to the dimness inside. The interior was exactly what he'd expected. Dark wood paneling, a long bar with brass fixtures, and the mingled scents of old beer and lemon cleaner. A lone bartender stood behind the bar, polishing glasses with mechanical precision. He was a thin man in his 40s with graying hair pulled back in a ponytail. He looked up as Liam approached. Setting down his towel? What'll it be? The bartender asked. Jack and Coke, Liam said, settling onto a bar stool. As the bartender mixed his drink, Liam studied the man's movements, efficient, practiced, the hallmark of someone who had been doing this for years. When the glass was set before him, Liam took a sip before speaking. Is the owner around today? The bartender shook his head. No, Mr. Vance has been out of town for about a week. Business trip or something. Should be back soon, though. He picked up another glass to polish. Something I can help you with? Maybe? Liam rotated his glass on the bar. You hear about what's going on at the Willow Creek Motel? Police investigation? Bartender's hands stilled for just a moment before resuming their work. Heard something about it. Cops found something in one of the rooms. Did you know Sean O'Connell? He used to work here. Now the bartender set down the glass entirely, his expression guarded. Yay, I knew Sean. Worked some shifts with him back. In the day, good guy, reliable. His eyes narrowed slightly. Why are you asking? I'm his brother Liam. The bartender's demeanor shifted immediately, a wall coming up behind his eyes. He picked up his towel again, his movements suddenly jerky. Look, I already told the cops everything I knew 6 years ago. If they need to talk to me again, they know where to find me. They'll probably be here tomorrow anyway. I'm not trying to cause trouble, Liam said, confused by the reaction. Sean always spoke well of the people here, said you were all like family. We were, till he disappeared. The bartender's voice was flat. Changed everything. Liam leaned forward. Can you help me understand this town better? The community? I've heard there might be some unusual groups around. Cults, maybe even satanic ones. The bartender's laugh was humorless. Man, this is a college town. We get all types in here. Goths, punks, philosophy majors who think they're edgy. Nothing wrong with any of them, as far as I can see. He moved down the bar, creating distance. They drink, they pay, they don't cause trouble. That's all I care about. But have you noticed any actual organized groups? Anyone who might have had a problem with Sean? I serve drinks. I don't get involved in people's business. The door chimed as new customers entered. 2 college students, a young man and woman, both dressed in black jeans and band t-shirts. They approached the bar, pulling out their IDs before the bartender could ask. He checked them carefully, then poured 2 draft beers. Liam finished his, Jack and Coke, pulling out his wallet. He laid a 20 on the bar, enough to cover the drink and a decent tip. As he stood to leave, the bartender suddenly spoke. Look, I didn't mean to be rude. Just trying to be careful about what I say. The owner? Mr. Vance. He knew your brother better than any of us. When he gets back, he might be able to tell you more. The bartender glanced at Liam, then away. But if you really want to know about Sean, you might try his church. He went every Sunday morning, regular as clockwork. Which church? Don't know exactly which one he attended, but there's a big Protestant church over on King Street. Havenwood Community Chapel. Most locals go there. He paused. Your brother was serious about his faith. Real serious. Thank you, Liam said. Sincerely, he glanced at the college students, who were deep in conversation over their beers. Both wore unusual rings on their right-hand silver bands, with what looked like some kind of design. He couldn't quite make out from this distance. Probably some band logo or fashion trend he was too old to understand. He left an extra 5 on the bar and headed for the door. The afternoon sunlight was harsh after the pub's darkness. Liam climbed back into his Honda and pulled out his Garmin GPS unit. Typing in Havenwood Community Chapel with the stylus, the device calculated for a moment before displaying the route. Only a 10-minute drive through the historic district. He pulled out of the pub's parking lot and followed the electronic voice's directions through Avon Woods' tree-lined streets. The church came into view as he turned onto King Street, its white steeple rising above the surrounding buildings like a beacon. But it was the activity across the street that first caught his attention. Havenwood University students had set up what appeared to be some kind of fair or recruitment event in the park opposite the church. Colorful banners fluttered between temporary stalls, and students in matching black t-shirts moved between the tables. He recognized the same style of clothing the 2 students in the bar had worn. Liam parked along the curb and walked toward the church. Deliberately ignoring the student gathering, The community chapel was an impressive structure. Red brick with white trim, tall windows with proper glazing, and heavy oak doors that spoke of permanence and tradition. He pulled open one of the doors and stepped into the narthex. The interior was quiet for a weekday afternoon, but not empty. From the sanctuary, he could hear voices raised in harmonia choir rehearsing. He followed the sound, his footsteps echoing on the polished floor. In the sanctuary, about 15 people stood in the choir loft, their voices blending in what sounded like a traditional hymn. A man in his 50s stood before them, conducting with precise movements. He wore a clerical collar and black shirt. Clearly, the pastor Liam waited in a pew until the song ended, then approached as the pastor gave notes to his choir. The man noticed him and excused himself, walking down to meet Liam with an extended hand. "Welcome to Havenwood Community Chapel. I'm Pastor Michael Evans." "Liam O'Connell," he replied, shaking the offered hand. "Sorry to interrupt your rehearsal." "Not at all. The choir can practice on their own for a few minutes." Pastor Evans's eyes were kind but searching. "What brings you to our church today?" "I'm looking for information about my brother, Sean O'Connell. He went missing 6 years ago. Someone told me he might have been a member of your congregation." The pastor's brow furrowed thoughtfully. "Sean O'Connell. I'm afraid the name doesn't immediately ring a bell. You have to understand we have over 700 members at each service, and we hold 3 services every Sunday. I tend to remember those most active in church programs." But he paused. "You have a photograph?" Liam pulled out his Motorola Razr flip phone, navigating to the saved photos. He showed the pastor a picture of Sean from his bartending days, proudly displaying 2 colorful cocktails he'd created. The cross pendant was clearly visible against his white shirt. "Ah, Pastor," Evans said, pointing at the screen. "I don't recognize the young man, but I definitely recognize that cross. We give those 2 members who complete our evangelism seminar, Winning Souls for Christ. It's an intensive 12-week course on sharing the gospel and bringing new disciples to the Lord. There's a date engraved on the back," Liam said. 15th, 1999. Would that mean anything? That would be his graduation date from the seminar. "We always engrave them as a commemoration." The pastor's expression grew more serious. "If your brother completed that course, he was a dedicated Christian, baptized and committed to spreading God's word." Liam took a breath. "Pastor, the police found something this morning at the Willow Creek Motel. There was an occult symbol drawn on the floor and blood that matches my brother's DNA." Pastor Evans's face darkened. "I cannot believe anyone who wore that cross would willingly participate in occult practices. It goes against everything we teach, everything the seminar represents." "I agree. I think someone else did this to him, someone who might be part of an occult group." Liam leaned forward. "Are there groups like that in Havenwood?" The pastor sighed deeply, glancing toward the windows. "I'm afraid so. It's actually why we started the evangelism seminar in the first place. We've seen an alarming increase in occult fascination among young people, especially college students. Witchcraft, magic circles, ritual practices. What starts as rebellion or curiosity can lead to much darker places." "How organized are these groups?" "More than you might think. They don't just meet in secret anymore. They hold open festivals, recruit at student organizations. They're bold about it." Pastor Evans gestured toward the window. "That event across the street. I guarantee you'll find at least 1 or 2 occult groups recruiting there, and the police don't do anything. What can they do? Freedom of religion? Freedom of assembly. Till there's criminal activity they can prove their hands are tied." The pastor's voice carried frustration. "Odd, but it's very much the church's concern. The Lord forbids such practices, and we must protect our flock." Liam stood. "Maybe I should check out that student event. If you do, be careful," Pastor Evans warned. "Most of the students are just curious kids following trends. But the leaders, the ones really running these groups, they must have agendas." "Why do you say that?" "We've had reports from congregation members, stories of rituals, ceremonies. But no one's ever brought forward real evidence of illegal activities." The pastor paused. "Regarding your brother, I'll cooperate fully with any investigation. Now that you mention it, I do remember the police coming here 6 years ago asking questions. I'll help however I can. Thank you, Pastor. I appreciate your time." Remember Pastor Evan said as Liam turned to leave, if you do encounter these people, pray for God's protection. If you see anything illegal, contact the police immediately. Liam nodded, shook the pastor's hand again, and walked back through the sanctuary. The choir had resumed their rehearsal, their voices following him out into the afternoon sun. Outside Havenwood Community Chapel, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across King Street. The student event in the park was clearly winding down. Several stalls had already been dismantled, and students were loading folding tables into vans. It made sense. They'd probably been there since morning, and it was now pushing 3:30 p.m. Liam stood on the church steps, debating his approach. He was 32, clearly not college-aged, and would stand out among the students. As he weighed his options, a group of 5 students emerged from behind one of the remaining stalls. They were impossible to miss. Heavy black makeup rimmed their eyes, their hair styled in deliberately messy spikes and colors that didn't occur in nature. They moved as a pack, laughing at some private joke. One of them, a young man with green-streaked hair, pointed directly at Liam standing on the church steps. The whole group turned to look, and their laughter grew louder. They began making exaggerated signs of the cross, mockingly genuflecting in his direction. "Bless you, church boy," one of the girls called out, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Liam noticed they all wore identical rings on their right hands, the same style he'd glimpsed at the bar. Now he could see them more clearly. Silver bands with what appeared to be a ram's head design. He chose to ignore their taunts, watching as they climbed into a beat-up Ford Taurus and peeled out of their parking spot. Behind them, another group of similarly dressed students was struggling with the remnants of their stall. They carried rolled banners, a folding table, and boxes of what looked like flyers or promotional materials. One student, a girl with jet black hair and purple streaks, was trying to manage a particularly unwieldy banner that must have been 10 feet long. She stepped backward into the street, the banner blocking her view of oncoming traffic. Liam saw the Chevy Silverado before she did. It was coming fast, the driver probably not expecting anyone to step into the road mid-block. Without thinking, Liam sprinted forward, grabbing the girl around the waist and pulling her backward. They both tumbled onto the asphalt as the truck roared past, its horn blaring angrily. The banner flew from her hands, landing in a crumpled heap nearby. "Jesus!" the girl gasped, sprawled on the street. "That was close. Are you hurt?" Liam asked, helping her to her feet. His palms were scraped from the fall, but it was nothing serious. "No, I'm okay, thanks to you," she said, brushing off her black jeans, looking shaken. "I didn't even see it coming." Her friends had noticed the commotion and came running. "Jenna, what happened?" "I'm fine," she assured them. "This guy just saved me." Liam helped gather her scattered materials. The banner advertising something called the Alternative Spirituality Society. A box of flyers with symbols he didn't recognize, and what looked like incense bundles. "Let me help you get this to your car," he offered. Jenna nodded gratefully, and they walked to a Honda Civic parked down the block. Her friends had gone back to loading their own vehicle. As they loaded items into her back seat and trunk, Liam couldn't help but notice the trunk's other contents. A box filled with what looked like hand-rolled cigarettes, probably. Marijuana, given the distinct herbal smells, several cases of Keystone Light beer, and another sealed box he couldn't identify. Jenna quickly closed the trunk. "Thanks again." "Really? I could have been killed." Friends whistled from their car. "Jenna, come on. Gotta go," she said, hurrying to the driver's side. "But seriously, thank you." She drove off, following her friend's vehicle. It wasn't until her Honda was stopped at the intersection a block away that Liam noticed something glinting in the street where they had fallen. He waited for a break in traffic, then retrieved it. It was one of those silver rings, clearly Jenna's now, bent and broken from being run over by multiple vehicles. The design was clearer up close, definitely a goat's head surrounded by a pentagram. The band was cracked nearly in half. Liam looked up to see Jenna's car still waiting at the red light. Without really thinking about it, he jogged to his own car. She hadn't saved him from witnessing a tragedy, but he owed her something. The least he could do was return her property. Maybe she needed it for something. He started his engine and pulled out, keeping her Honda in sight as the light turned green. Liam maintained a careful distance behind Jenna's Honda Civic as it followed the other student's car through Havenwood's outskirts. The buildings grew sparser, replaced by farmland and patches of forest. After 20 minutes, they'd clearly left the town limits, and Liam's unease grew. Where were these students heading? The road wound through Pennsylvania's rural landscape, past weathered barns and fallow fields preparing for winter. Traffic thinned until they were virtually alone on the two-lane highway. After another 10 minutes, Jenna's turn signal blinked, and she pulled onto the shoulder. The lead car stopped 100 yards ahead. Liam pulled over behind her, his hands slightly trembling as he turned off the engine. Through his windshield, he watched Jenna exit her car, her body language tense. He stepped out to meet her. "Why? Are you following me?" Her voice was sharp, frightened. "What do you want?" Liam raised his hands peacefully. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. You dropped this back there." He pulled the broken ring from his pocket. "I thought you might need it." Jenna took the mangled silver band, examining the cracked goat's head design. Her expression softened slightly. "Oh, it's destroyed." She looked up at him. "It's useless now, but thanks for trying, I guess." She turned back toward her car, but Liam called after her, "Wait, where are you guys heading? This is pretty far from Havenwood. That's none of your business." Her guard was back up. "We're just going on a road trip. College stuff." The other car's doors opened, and 3 students approached. 2 guys and a girl, all wearing the same dark clothing and silver rings. One of the males, tall with a shaved head, stepped protectively near Jenna. "This guy bothering you, Jen?" "Why? It's fine. He was just returning my ring. It's the one that got crushed when he saved me." The tall student looked Liam up and down. "Okay, well, you did your good deed. Now stop following us, or we'll call the cops." "Got it?" "Sure, no problem," Liam said, backing toward his car. "Just wanted to return her property? I'll head back to town now." He got into his Honda, watching as the group walked back to their vehicles. But with his window cracked, their voices carried on the quiet country air. "Damn, Jenna, Father's going." "To be pissed when he sees you broke your ring?" the tall one said, laughing. "Screw it," another voice chimed in. "We'll still get to party with those Jesus freaks tonight. It's going to be lit." They all laughed, and one of them made a crude gesture that made Liam's stomach turn. The casual mention of Jesus freaks, combined with the occult rings and the supplies he'd seen in Jenna's trunk, set off every alarm in his head. He started his engine and pulled a U-turn, driving back toward Havenwood for about a quarter of a mile before pulling into a farm's access road. He waited 5 minutes, then turned around again. If these students were planning something involving Christians, and given what had been found at the motel, he couldn't just drive away. Keeping his distance, he spotted their cars ahead and followed at a gap of nearly half a mile. The route took them north, then west, following increasingly remote roads. Signs indicated they were heading toward the Blackwood State Forest. After an hour of driving, they entered the forest. The road was narrow, canopied by tall pines that blocked out much of the late afternoon sun. It was past 5 p.m. now. Shadows lengthened between the trees. Liam hung back even further, catching only glimpses of the cars ahead on the winding road. After another 40 minutes of careful pursuit, he saw brake lights through the trees. The cars had turned onto an even smaller dirt road. Liam slowed, then followed, his Honda suspension protesting the rutted surface. Through the forest, he glimpsed a structure, an old barn, its red paint faded to brown, sitting in a clearing. He pulled off the dirt road about 200 yards from the barn, parking behind a thick stand of pines. From here, he could see the students. Unloading their vehicles, they carried the cases of beer, the boxes, and other supplies toward the barn's entrance. Once they'd all gone inside and the heavy door slid shut, Liam crept closer. Using the tree line for cover, he approached until he could see through one of the barn's few windows. The interior was dark except for flickering candlelight. Shadowy figures moved about, and he could make out what looked like robes being pulled. On Overstreet clothes? Liam checked his phone. 2 bars of signal, not great, but enough for emergency calls. He settled behind a large oak tree to watch, wondering if he was overreacting. Maybe this was just some harmless college party, a bunch of kids playing at being occultists. They all looked over 21. The beer was legal. He was about to head back to his car when a scream pierced the forest quiet. It wasn't a party scream or a laugh. It was pure agony, raw and desperate. Liam's blood went cold. He fumbled for his phone, punching in 911. Another scream echoed from the barn as the call connected. 911. What's your emergency? I'm in an old barn in Blackwood State Forest, off Route 274. I heard screaming. The barn door suddenly flew open, crashing against its frame. Figure burst out, a naked man, pale in the dying light, running with desperate, lurching strides toward the forest. Liam dropped his phone, pressing himself against the tree. The man stumbled closer, and Liam's heart nearly stopped. Even from 30 yards away, even after 6 years, he knew that gait, that build. Sean, he whispered. Robed figures emerged from the barn, but they moved without urgency, spreading out in a casual search pattern. They seemed confident their quarry wouldn't get far. Liam darted between trees, intercepting his brother's path. Sean, he hissed. His brother spun wildly, eyes wide with terror, searching for the voice's source. It's me, Liam, your brother. He stepped into view, and their eyes met. Recognition dawned in Sean's haunted face. Liam, what are you? No. You can't be here, it's dangerous. You have to leave. Not leaving you. Liam shrugged off his jacket, wrapping it around his brother's trembling shoulders. That's when he saw Sean's hands, or what remained of them. All 10 fingers were gone, leaving scarred stumps. His feet were the same, his toes amputated. God, Sean. What did they? ... double quotes, devils, Sean sobbed. They torture us. They'll kill us slowly. They took my fingers and toes one by one, every time I tried to escape. I don't have any left, so God knows what they'll take next. Rustling leaves announced the search party's approach. Liam grabbed his brother's arm, trying to guide him deeper into the forest. But the robed students had already flanked them. Strong hands seized both brothers, dragging them back toward the barn. Let us go, Liam shouted. What you're doing here is illegal. I called the police. One student pulled back his hood, the tall one from earlier. Hey, father. This one came out of the church earlier? He must be a Christian too. A figure in a more elaborate robe stepped forward, his face hidden in shadow. When he spoke, his voice carried a slight accent Liam couldn't place. Excellent. Lucifer has blessed us with another lamb. He gestured to his followers. Bring them inside. Prepare the crosses. You're insane. Liam struggled against the hands holding him. The leader stepped closer, his breath reeking of alcohol and something chemical.
Your Bible says that whoever
follows Christ must walk as he walked. That means suffering. That means crucifixion. We're simply helping you fulfill your own scripture. He turned to address his followers. Prepare the inverted cross for our wayward Sean, since he has no more digits to offer. Perhaps his eyes will suffice this time. No, Sean wailed. Please, no more. They were dragged into the barn's interior, which reeked of incense sweat. In fear, by candlelight, Liam could see crude symbols painted on the walls and several wooden crosses leaning against the far wall. A silver tray sat on a makeshift altar, holding what looked like pills and an ornate goblet of red wine. Take 2 pills each, one robed figure commanded. Drink the wine. It'll make things easier. Liam and Sean stood frozen. Then, with desperate strength, Liam swept his arm across the tray, sending pills scattering across the dirt floor, and the wine spattering against the wall. Shit, get those pills. The cultists dropped to their knees, frantically searching for the scattered drugs in the dim light. In that moment of chaos, a sound cut through everything else. Police sirens growing. Louder, coming fast through the forest. The wailing of police sirens shattered the barn's oppressive atmosphere. The sound seemed to electrify Liam, flooding him with desperate courage. As the robed figures scrambled for the scattered pills, he twisted violently away from the distracted hands holding him. His eyes swept the barn's interior and landed on an ornate wooden chair, almost a throne, where the leader had been sitting. Draped over one arm was a leather holster containing what looked like a .38 revolver. Without thinking, Liam lunged for it, his fingers closing around the grip. Everyone back. He swung the weapon in a wide arc, his hands shaking but his voice firm. Get away from my brother? Cultist froze. One of them, still holding Sean, pressed a knife against his throat. Drop the gun, or we'll bleed him out. Right here. You kill him. I start shooting, Liam said, surprised by his own steadiness. Starting with your father. The sirens were getting louder, multiple vehicles by the sound of it. The leader pushed back his hood, revealing a weathered face with cold, dark eyes and graying hair. He looked more like a businessman than a cult leader, except for the savage intelligence in his expression. You won't shoot, he said calmly. Christians don't. A sudden commotion erupted from the barn's shadowy corners. Figures burst from behind stacked hay bales and farm equipment, naked, scarred, but very much alive. The other Christian captives threw themselves at their captors with the desperate strength of people with nothing left to lose. The barn exploded into chaos. Robed figures grappled with their former victims. The knife fell away from Sean's throat as his captor was tackled. Someone knocked over a candelabra, sending shadows dancing wildly on the walls. Liam didn't waste the opportunity. He ran for the barn door, throwing it open and shouting, "In here! We need help in here!" State police cruisers were screeching to a halt in the clearing, their lights painting the trees red and blue. Officers poured out, weapons drawn, moving. With trained precision, drop the weapon. One shouted at Liam. He immediately placed the revolver on the ground and raised his hands. There are victims inside. They need help. The officers swept past him into the barn. What followed was swift and professional. Commands rang out. On the ground, hands where I can see them. The cultists, outnumbered and caught off guard, offered little resistance. One by one, the robed figures were handcuffed and led outside. Officers made them kneel in a line on the grass as more police vehicles arrived. The EMTs were right behind them, wheeling gurneys and carrying medical supplies. Liam watched as an officer pulled the hood off the leader, revealing his face clearly in the flashing lights. The officer's eyes widened. He spoke urgently into his radio, and Liam caught fragments. Positive ID, Ricardo Vargas. Mexican national, ... wanted list. More officers surrounded the kneeling leader, their manner shifting from routine arrest to high alert. The victims were being helped from the barn now, wrapped in thermal blankets, some walking, others carried. Liam counted 5 beside Sean, all showing signs of prolonged captivity and abuse. Their relief was palpable, some crying, others staring in shocked silence at the sky they probably thought they'd never see again. Among the arrested cultists, Liam recognized several faces from the student fair. There was the tall one with the shaved head, now looking very young and scared without his hood. And there was Jenna, the girl he'd saved from traffic. Her heavy makeup was smeared with tears, her expression a mixture of shame and terror as an officer cuffed her hands behind her back. A detective approached Liam, notebook in hand. "Sir, I'm Detective Rodriguez. Can you tell me how you came to be here?" Liam pointed to Jenna. "I helped that girl earlier today when she almost got hit by a car. She dropped her ring occult symbol on its hand. I tried to return it. That's what led me to follow them here. We'll need a full statement," Rodriguez said. "These people are going to be questioned thoroughly at the station. We'll sort out who's a victim and who's a perpetrator." He paused, looking at the barn where crime scene technicians were now entering. "This is going to be a major investigation." From inside the barn, Liam heard an officer shout, "We've got a hidden room here. Stairs going down. Jesus Christ, there's a whole underground setup." More emergency vehicles arrived. FBI, ATF. Even what looked like D, whatever they'd stumbled onto, was bigger than a simple cult. Liam. He turned to see Sean on a gurney, an oxygen mask over his face. Liam rushed to his brother's side, tears. Finally coming, they gripped each other's hands. Or in Sean's case, what remained of them. "I thought you were dead," Liam whispered. 6 years, Sean? We thought you were gone." "Yes." Sean pulled the mask aside slightly. "So much happened. Can't, ... not now. Someday I'll tell you everything, but ... double quotes." His voice broke. "It's okay," Liam said. "You don't have to explain anything. You're Alive. That's all that matters. An EMT gently replaced Sean's oxygen mask. Sir, we need to transport him now. He's severely dehydrated, malnourished, and the amputations show signs of infection. He needs immediate hospital care. Which hospital? Liam asked. Havenwood, General? Are you family? I'm his brother. You can follow us, but we need to go now. Liam squeezed Sean's hand once more, then jogged to his Honda as he started the engine. He took one last look at the scene. Police cars everywhere, cultists being loaded into vans, forensic teams setting up floodlights. In the strobing lights, the old barn looked like something from a nightmare. He pulled out behind the ambulance, following the flashing lights back through the darkening forest toward Havenwood and whatever came next. The Havenwood General Hospital emergency room was a controlled frenzy of activity. Medical staff rushed between curtained areas where the rescued victims were being treated. Liam found himself in the waiting room, suddenly exhausted as the adrenaline drained from his system. Institutional chairs and fluorescent lighting felt surreal after the nightmare in the barn. He needed to tell someone who would understand the spiritual magnitude of what had happened. Walking to the nurse's station, he asked the desk clerk, "Could I get the phone number for Havenwood Community Chapel? I need to contact the pastor." The clerk consulted a laminated sheet of local religious contacts and wrote the number on a post-it. Note: Liam used the courtesy phone in the corner, dialing with trembling fingers. Havenwood Chapel, how may I help you? This is Liam O'Connell. Spoke with Pastor Evans this afternoon. Is he available? It's urgent. One moment, please. The pastor's voice came on the line. Liam, what's happened? We found him. Sean's alive. We're at Havenwood, General. The words tumbled out as he explained the rescue, the cult, everything. Dear Lord, Pastor Evans breathed. I'm coming right now. Tell Sean we're praying for him. Liam had barely hung up when he spotted Detective Rostova entering the ER with another officer. She saw him and approached. Liam, we need to take your statement. There's a family conference room we can use. He followed them to a small room with a round table and a box of tissues. Prominently displayed, clearly a space designed for difficult conversations. Detective Rostova activated a small tape recorder while her partner took notes. For the next 40 minutes, Liam recounted everything, from leaving the church to the moment police arrived at the barn. The detectives interrupted occasionally for clarification, but mostly let him talk when he finished. Detective Rostova leaned back. The students are talking. Most are terrified college kids who got in way over their heads. But we've uncovered something much bigger. The leader? Liam asked. Ricardo Vargas, Mexican national wanted by the D for 18 years. He's been running drug operations across the Northeast. But this, she shook her head. This is new. He created a cult to move product, supply drugs to his inner circle, what he called the faithful, in exchange for recruiting new members. New recruits had to buy drugs for rituals to prove loyalty. It was a self-sustaining market, and the Christian victims that developed later. Some members held genuine anti-Christian beliefs, saw it as serving Satan by making Christians suffer. Vargas encouraged it, kept them distracted from his real business. She consulted her notes. According to one of the students we arrested, your brother was specifically targeted. Why Sean? He converted one of their former leaders to Christianity. Elias Vance, the bar owner where Sean worked. Vance left the cult, became a Christian, and they blamed Sean. It was revenge. Liam felt sick. Vance was part of the cult. But if he's been free all this time, why didn't he say anything? He's back with the cult now, Detective Rostova said. When they captured Sean, the cult made Travis believe that the Christian God had no real power. Couldn't even protect his own people. Because of his past betrayal, Travis was no longer in a leadership role. They demoted him, kept him at the bottom until he could prove his loyalty again. Rostova pulled out a photograph and placed it on the table. He told us exactly what happened. 6 years ago, Sean closed the bar and stepped outside for some air. They were waiting. They injected him with methamphetamine and threw him into the trunk of a car. The motel, room 6, They performed their ritual there. It's where the symbol and blood came from. The front desk clerk, a girl named Sadie Morrison, was part of the cult. She made sure no one investigated, then disappeared shortly after. After the motel, they took Sean to the barn. She showed him another photograph, a cellar wall covered in scratched crosses and Bible verses. In one corner, in shaky letters, Sean, "Oh, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Psalm 23. Liam's vision blurred with tears. He wrote that when he still had fingers, the conditions were horrific. They kept Christian victims alive to torture, them mocking their faith by saying they should suffer like Christ. Twisted theology. Detective Rostova's voice held disgust. Vargas faces federal drug charges, kidnapping, torture, potentially murder if we find bodies in that underground room. The students face varying charges based on their involvement. A knock interrupted them. A doctor in scrubs peered in. "O'Connell, your brother is stable and in room 314. You can see him now." Liam thanked the detectives and hurried to the elevator, 3rd floor, following signs to room 314. Through the doorway, he saw Sean propped up in the hospital bed for lines. Running into his arms, looking small and fragile under the white sheets, Sean, his brother's eyes open, focusing slowly. Liam. The name came out as a whisper. Liam pulled a chair close, carefully taking Sean's mutilated hand. The tears came freely now. 6 years of grief and guilt and hope all mixing together. Sean's lips moved, barely audible. "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." ... Liam finished. ... Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." A figure appeared in the doorway. Pastor Evans, still in his clerical collar, carrying a worn Bible. "May I?" asked gently. Liam nodded and the pastor entered, standing at the foot of the bed. "Sean, I'm Pastor Evans from Havenwood Chapel. Your brother told me what happened. We've been praying for you." "The whole congregation has been praying for 6 years." Sean's eyes filled with tears. The pastor opened his Bible but didn't read from it. Instead, he prayed from the heart for healing, for peace for the other victims, even for the souls of those who had done such evil. As the prayer ended, Liam felt something shift in the room. Not a dramatic miracle, but a quiet presence. His brother was alive. Damaged, scarred, but alive. The valley of the shadow of death had not claimed him. Through faith, through hope, through a love that endured 6 years of not knowing, they had found their way back to each other. And in that hospital room, with machines beeping and the PA system calling doctors, Liam understood that sometimes the greatest testimonies come from the darkest places. Sean squeezed his hand weakly, and Liam squeezed back. Neither brother needed words. They were together again. Everything else could wait. Story 2 Claire opened the hallway closet to grab a vacuum but paused. From inside came the sound of birds, wind rustling through leaves and the distant creak of trees swaying. She pushed the coats aside. At the back, a faint breeze carried the earthy scent of pine needles and damp moss. I first noticed the change in my home during an ordinary cleaning session. The hallway closet had always been just that, a closet. A narrow space for storing winter, coats, umbrellas, and cleaning supplies. Nothing more, nothing less. Yet when I opened it that evening, something wasn't right. Instead of the expected musty scent of rarely worn jackets and cleaning chemicals, my senses were flooded with the unmistakable aroma of a forest after rain fresh, earthy, with hints of pine and decaying leaves. I stood motionless, hands still, on the doorknob, breathing in what couldn't possibly be there. Then came the sounds, distant at first. The gentle rustle of leaves in a breeze that didn't exist in my apartment. A soft trilling of birds I couldn't name, the occasional creak of what sounded like massive tree trunks swaying far away. Must be the neighbors playing nature sounds, I whispered to myself. Though I knew the elderly couple next door preferred game shows to ambient noise, I pushed aside the hanging coats, expecting to find the solid back wall of the closet. My fingers, instead, felt a gentle current of air, cool, moist, carrying that same woodland scent, now stronger. My heart quickened as I pressed deeper into the space that should have ended but somehow continued. The darkness at the back of the closet seemed thicker than normal darkness, as if it had substance. I reached for the light switch, but hesitated. Part of me didn't want to see what might be revealed. That night, I documented everything in my journal. The smells, the sounds, the inexplicable breeze from a dead-end closet. Writing it down made it seem both more real and more absurd. I sketched what I imagined might be behind that dark mysteries. Perhaps or nothing at all, just an impossible extension of space where no extension should exist.
And my sleep was fitful.
Interrupted by dreams of walking through forests I'd never seen, following paths that twisted back onto themselves. I woke to the sound of a woodpecker, only to realize the sound wasn't in my dream but coming from the hallway. The next morning, I approached the closet with caution and purpose. I brought a flashlight this time, determined to investigate properly. The forest sounds were fainter in daylight, but undeniably present. When I shone the light into the depths of the closet, the beam seemed to dissipate, not quite reaching the back wall. I decided to record the sounds, setting up my phone to capture audio. Left it inside the closet and went about my day.
When?
I retrieved it later. The recording contained only static, punctuated by what sounded like whispered words in a language I couldn't identify. Each day, I documented new developments. The forest scent grew stronger. The sounds became more varied. Water running over stones joined the bird calls and rustling leaves. At night, something that might have been distant howling made me shut the closet door firmly, only to lie awake listening for it through the walls. I began to notice other changes in my apartment. Leaves appearing on the hallway carpet, despite no open windows. Unexplained moisture collecting in the corners near the closet. A mushroom growing from the baseboard that disappeared when I tried to photograph it. Friends started commenting on my distraction, the dark circles under my eyes. "Are you sleeping?" they'd ask, and I'd nod, not wanting to explain that sleep had become secondary to my nightly observations of the closet. How could I tell them I'd started sitting in the dark, watching the narrow space under the closet door for glimpses of green light that shouldn't be there? I brought home sensing equipment borrowed from a friend in environmental sciences. Readings made no sense. Oxygen levels too high for an enclosed space. Barometric pressure fluctuating wildly. Ultraviolet radiation where there should be none. The journal entries grew more detailed, more frantic. I noted temperature variations, sketched the patterns of light I sometimes saw filtering through the coat hangers. I pressed leaves I found in my bed sheets between the pages, only to find them transformed into scraps of paper the next day. Then came the night I heard my name. It wasn't loud, barely audible over the now familiar forest ambience. But it was clear, spoken in a voice that sounded like rustling leaves and creaking wood. I yanked open the closet door, half expecting to find someone hiding among my coats. There was no one there, but the forest sound swelled, as if in greeting. The darkness at the back seemed to recede slightly, revealing not a wall, but a continuation of space, what looked like the beginning of a narrow dirt path winding between shadowy tree trunks. Slammed the door shut and pushed my bookcase in front of it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type my account of what happened. That night, I slept at a hotel. I returned home the next day, telling myself I had imagined the path that stress and sleep deprivation were taking there. Toll. The bookcase remained where I'd left it, but something had changed. A thin line of dirt stretched from under the closet door, across the carpet, disappearing under my bedroom door. In my room, I found footprints not human, something with 3. Toes pressed into my carpet as if in wet mud, though the fibers were dry to the touch. They circled my bed once before ending abruptly at my window, which remained locked from the inside. That should have been enough to make me move out to call someone, though. Who would believe me? Instead, I found myself removing the bookcase, opening the closet once more. The forest sounds had never been louder, and now there were movements, 2 shadows shifting between distant trees. The impression of something large moving just out of sight. The path was undeniably there, winding away into green-tinted darkness. Next to it stood a small stone marker with unfamiliar symbols carved into its surface. When I reached out to touch it, my fingers came away stained with something that looked like sap but smelled like copper. I began to map the visible portion of the path. Measure the dimensions of the closet's interior versus the exterior walls. The numbers didn't add up. The closet was deeper on the inside by several feet, an impossibility. I confirmed multiple times. My journal now included samples, a feather I couldn't identify, soil that contained microscopic organisms that moved under my magnifying glass, a fragment of bark with patterns that changed position when I wasn't looking directly at them. Sleep became rare, but when it came, it brought dreams of walking that path, of finding something important at its end, something waiting specifically for me. I would wake with mud between my toes and scratches on my arms that stung when I washed them. The voice called more frequently now, sometimes just my name, sometimes phrases in that same unidentifiable language. Occasionally English words. Come, see, join, remember. Remember what? I had no connection to any forest, no childhood memories of getting lost among trees, no trauma involving nature. Yet, something about the voice stirred a recognition deep within me, a familiarity I couldn't place. I set up a camera facing the open closet, recording day and night. The footage showed nothing unusual, just my coats hanging undisturbed. But the sounds remained audible in person, the smells unmistakable. When I stepped into the closet, I could feel the temperature drop, feel that breeze against my skin. None of this registered on any recording. The night I decided to follow the path, I prepared meticulously. I packed a bag with water, food, first aid supplies, and extra batteries. I left a letter explaining everything, placed it on my kitchen table, along with copies of my journal and all the evidence I'd collected. If I didn't return, at least someone might understand what happened. Standing at the threshold, flashlight in hand, I experienced a moment of perfect clarity. This was madness. No rational person would step into an impossible forest growing in their closet. I should call a doctor, a priest, someone who could help me understand what was happening to my mind. Then I heard the voice again, clearer than ever before. We've been waiting for you to come home. Home. The word echoed in my chest with a rightness I couldn't deny. And suddenly, I remembered glimpses, playing among massive roots, sleeping under canopies of stars visible through ancient branches, the taste of berries that don't grow in any human market. I stepped onto the path. The closet door swung shut behind me with a gentle click, and the forest opened up around me. The trees stretched impossibly high, their canopies lost in mist. The path beneath my feet felt more real than any ground I'd walked before. The air filled my lungs with a vitality I'd forgotten could exist. In the distance, something moved between the trees, something tall and fluid in its movements, neither fully animal nor human. It paused, turned toward me, and I saw eyes reflecting my flashlight beam, not two eyes, but many arranged in patterns across what might have been a face. It raised what might have been an arm in greeting, and I recognized it. Now, I walked deeper. Into this place, my footsteps sure despite never having consciously been here before. My body remembers this journey, even if my mind does not. The residents of this forest watch from behind trees and under ferns, their forms challenging my understanding. Of life itself? Some call out and welcome, others merely observe. The path continues ahead, winding between ancient trees toward something important, something I've been seeking without knowing it. Something that explains why I always felt like a visitor in the human world. If someone finds my journal, if you're reading this now, know that I didn't disappear. I returned. The closet in my apartment might appear normal to you, just coats and cleaning supplies and a solid back wall. But put your ear against that wall. Listen closely. You might hear birds singing, leaves rustling, distant footsteps on a dirt path. You might hear me walking home story. Tumia noticed a shimmer on the bedroom wall. Like sunlight filtered through water, but the room was dim. No light was entering. As she approached, the shimmer grew stronger. Then it rippled, just once, like something inside had stirred. I first noticed it on a winter evening, that strange shimmer on my bedroom wall. It reminded me of sunlight dancing through water, casting liquid patterns across a surface. But the peculiar thing was that my room was dim, curtains drawn, no lamps lit. and certainly no direct light source that could explain the phenomenon. Just that singular patch of undulating brightness, about the size of my hand, hovering at eye level. My curiosity pulled me forward. With each step I took toward it, the shimmer intensified, becoming more pronounced, more deliberate in its movements. The light didn't spread or fade with proximity. It concentrated, as if aware of my approach. Then, when I was merely an arm's length away, it rippled once a single pulse that traveled across its surface like a stone dropped into still water. Something inside had stirred. I reached out, expecting to feel warmth from the light. My fingertips met only the cool, flat surface of my ordinary, eggshell white wall. Yet beneath that mundane texture, I sensed a subtle vibration, as if the particles within the plaster were agitated, dancing to an inaudible frequency. That night, I slept with my back to that wall, an inexplicable unease settling into my bones. Dreams came, filled with the sensation of being watched, of voices that spoke in frequencies just beyond my comprehension. I woke repeatedly, each time finding my room darker than before, except for that patch of wall which seemed to have grown. Brighter, larger, now the size of a dinner plate. Morning arrived with rational thoughts and logical explanations. Reflections from passing cars, perhaps, or a neighbor's security light hitting my wall at just the right angle. I spent that day cataloging possibilities, measuring angles of light, checking for sources both inside and outside my home. Explained the shimmer. By evening, I had set up a small camera facing the wall. If nothing else, I could capture the anomaly, prove to myself that my mind wasn't manufacturing this phenomenon. I sat across the room, watching the wall and the camera's display simultaneously. The shimmer appeared precisely at dusk, but the camera showed nothing, just a blank wall where my eyes clearly saw a pulsing light. I approached again, this time with a notebook in hand. Day 2, I wrote, "The light responds to proximity. It grows brighter when I near it. As if to confirm my observation, the shimmer intensified, its edges becoming more defined." Continued. Writing, documenting every change, every pulse, every strange quality the light exhibited. When I pressed my ear against the wall, I heard something like the rush of distant water, or perhaps wind through a narrow space, not quite natural, not quite mechanical. A sound that existed on the threshold between the familiar and the unknown. That night, I dreamed of swimming through darkness with only that strange light as my guide. In the dream, I knew with dream logic certainty that if I could reach the source of the light, I would understand something vital and tremendous. But no matter how hard I swam, the light remained just beyond my grasp. The third day brought changes. The shimmer had spread, now occupying a space roughly the size of a small window. And within it, I could discern patterns, not the random play, of light, but organized movements suggesting purpose. From certain angles, the patterns resembled writing in an alphabet I couldn't recognize. Fluid symbols that changed too quickly to memorize. I began taking photographs with various cameras. Digital, film, Polaroid. Not one captured the phenomenon. In each image, the wall appeared normal, unblemished by the light my eyes perceived so clearly. I recorded audio near the wall, and while my ears detected that strange rushing sound, the recordings contained only static. By the end of the week, the light had claimed nearly half the wall. At night, it cast enough illumination to read by, a cold blue-white glow that didn't reach the corners of the room, but rather seemed to pull shadows toward it. The vibration in the wall had strengthened. I could feel it without touching the surface now, a subtle disturbance in the air, like the pressure change before a storm. I began to notice other changes. Small objects in my room would shift positions when I wasn't looking. A coffee mug moved from my desk to the dresser. My keys migrated from hooks to tabletops never, while I watched only in moments of inattention. My dreams grew more intense. In them, voices called from behind the light, speaking words I almost understood. I would wake with fragments of messages fading from memory, leaving only the sense that something important had been communicated. On the 10th day, I noticed my reflection in the bathroom mirror looked subtly wrong. My movements lagged by a fraction of a second, My expression seemed to shift microscopically beyond my control. I avoided mirrors after that. The vibration from the wall had begun to affect my sleep, my thoughts. During quiet moments, I found myself swaying slightly, unknowingly matching the frequency of that subtle hum emanating from the shimmer. When I caught myself doing this, I would forcibly stop, only to find myself doing it again minutes later. I started documenting everything in a journal, my observations, my theories, my increasing sense that the light was not just a phenomenon, but an entity or a portal of some kind. The pages filled quickly with increasingly frantic handwriting, diagrams of the expanding light patterns, transcriptions of what I could remember from my dreams. On the 15th day, I woke to find the shimmer had claimed the entire wall. The light had changed quality, becoming deeper somehow, as if I was looking not at a surface but through a membrane into another space entirely. The rushing sound had evolved into something more complex, rhythmic pulses interspersed with what sounded like distant voices engaged in animated conversation. That afternoon, I noticed my shadow on the floor didn't match my position. It moved a half-second after I did and occasionally made small movements I hadn't. I found myself holding still for long periods, watching my shadow, waiting to catch it in independent motion. By evening, the entire room seemed wrong. Dimensions felt altered, corners not quite meeting at right angles. Objects appeared normal when viewed directly, but in my peripheral vision they seemed to warp, stretch, or contract. I decided to leave, to spend the night elsewhere and return with help, someone else to witness what was happening. I packed a small bag, grabbed my keys and journal, and headed for the door. My hand was on the doorknob when the light from the wall flared brilliantly, filling the room with blinding radiance. When my vision cleared, the door was gone. Just a smooth wall where it had been. Same with the windows, all replaced by unbroken expanses of wall. The only feature in the room now was that shimmering wall, pulsing with increasing urgency. My phone showed no signal. My watch had stopped. The only sound was that rushing, pulsing noise from the wall, now loud enough to feel in my chest cavity. I banged where the door had been, screamed until my voice gave out. Nothing changed. With no other option, I turned back to face the shimmering wall. Up close, the light seemed to bend around my hand when I reached toward it. The vibration had intensified to the point that I could see ripples in the glass of water I'd left on my bedside table. In that moment of desperate clarity, I understood. This had never been about light reflecting from an unknown source. This was about something on the other side, something that had been working its way through, weakening the barrier between here and there. I touched the wall. My fingers didn't meet resistance, but rather slipped through, as if the solid surface had become liquid. The sensation wasn't wet, but rather like pushing through a membrane of static electricity, pins and needles cascading. Up my arm, I pulled back, heart racing, to find my fingertips glowing faintly with the same quality of light as the wall. The glow spread slowly up my fingers, across my palm. It didn't hurt. If anything, it brought a strange clarity to my thoughts. A crystalline quality to my perception. Colors became more vivid, sounds more distinct. I could suddenly perceive the dust motes in the air as complex galaxies of interconnected particles. That night, I sat on my bed, watching the glow spread gradually up my arm. By morning, or what my body sensed was morning in the absence of windows, the light had reached my shoulder. My affected arm felt both intensely present and somehow distant, as if it existed in multiple locations simultaneously. I used my other hand to write in my journal, documenting the changes in my perception. The words seemed to shift on the page as I wrote them, rearranging themselves when I looked away. I wasn't sure anymore if I was recording events or if my writing was somehow creating them. The wall had changed again. Now, it appeared less like a flat surface and more like a vast, liquid expanse stretching into infinity. Shapes moved within it. Massive, complex forms that defied description, that seemed to exist in more dimensions than my mind could process. On what I believed was the 20th day, the glow had spread across my chest. My heartbeat had synchronized. With the pulsing of the wall, I found I could understand fragments of the voices now. They spoke of passage, of transformation, of spaces between spaces where different rules applied. I stood before the wall one final time, my body now more light than substance. The barrier between me and whatever lay beyond had thinned to almost nothing. I understood then that I had never been studying the phenomenon. It had been studying me, preparing me. The journal I'd kept wasn't documentation, but communication. A dialogue between myself and whatever existed on the other side. With that realization, the last resistance within me dissolved. I stepped forward into the light, feeling the world. I knew unravel around me, thread by thread, as consciousness as I understood it began to transform into something else entirely. I had one final human thought. The wall had never reflected light without a source. I had been the source all along, and now something else looks out through my eyes, learning to wear my face, studying the walls of this world. We're searching for new surfaces on which to cast its light. We see a shimmer on your wall, a patch of brightness with no apparent source. Know that I have found you. Know that I am learning the texture of your reality, testing its permeability. And when your wall begins to ripple, understand that something inside has stirred, and it's coming through. Story 3. Josh stood in front of the living room window, but instead of seeing himself, he saw the back of his own head, unmoving. As he tilted his head, the figure in the glass didn't follow. It just stood there. Then its shoulders twitched. Moving slightly closer to the glass, I blinked hard, thinking my eyes were playing tricks. The amber glow of sunset filtered through the window, casting long shadows across my hardwood floor. But that wasn't what held my attention. It was Josh, my roommate, standing motionless before the large bay window, his posture unnaturally rigid. "Josh," I called, my voice barely louder than a whisper. "Everything okay?" He didn't answer, didn't move, didn't even seem to breathe. I approached slowly, noticing how the evening light created strange patterns on the glass. As I drew closer, a cold sensation crawled up my spine. Something was wrong with Josh's reflection, or rather what should have been his reflection. Instead of showing his face, the window displayed the back of his head, an impossible image that defied everything I understood about physics. I reached out to touch his shoulder, and my fingers met solid flesh. He was real, tangible, present, but the reflection remained wrong. "Josh," I said again, firmly this time. "You need to step away from the window." His body tensed beneath my touch. "Do you see it?" he whispered, his voice cracking. "I can't turn around." Might turn to? The air in the room grew heavy, difficult to breathe. A faint odor of wet soil and decaying leaves permeated the space, though all windows were shut tight against the autumn chill. "What happened?" I asked, trying to maintain calm despite the churning in my gut. "I was just standing here," Josh said, words tumbling out rapidly, looking outside, when I noticed something odd in my peripheral vision. When I focused on my reflection, I realized I was looking at the back of my own head. And then, his voice dropped even lower. It moved on its own. The walls of our apartment seemed to contract slightly, as if the room itself were listening. The constant white noise of the building's ventilation system faded to silence, leaving only the sound of our breathing mind quickening, Josh's shallow and strained. "We need to cover this window," I decided, trying to approach the situation rationally, despite the impossibility before me. I backed away slowly, never taking my eyes off Josh and his wrong reflection. The hallway closet contained an old bedsheet. As I pulled it from the shelf, the fabric felt unusually cold against my skin, like it had been stored in a freezer rather than a closet. Static electricity made it cling to my fingers, little shocks jumping between the cotton and my skin. When I returned to the living room, Josh hadn't moved an inch, but his reflection had. The back of his head in the window was now definitely closer to the glass, as if it had taken a small step forward while remaining turned away. "Did it move again?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Josh nodded almost imperceptibly. "It's getting closer," he whispered. "I can feel it watching me from behind." I approached the window from the side, careful to stay out of the direct reflection. The sheet felt heavier now, denser somehow, as if it had absorbed moisture from the air. With a quick motion, I threw it over the window, covering the entire pane. For a moment, relief washed over me, problem solved, hidden from view. Then, the sheet began to take shape.
Out.
Not falling flat against the glass, as physics would demand, but protruding outward in the distinct form of a human head and shoulders. Pushing from the other side, Josh made a sound like a wounded animal, grabbed his arm, pulling him backward. "We're getting out of here," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. He resisted, his eyes fixed on the sheet-covered window. "I can't," he said. "Every time I've tried to move away, it moves closer." I turned my back completely. "Then don't look," I said, positioning myself between him and the window. "Keep your eyes on me." The sheet continued to bulge outward, the form behind it becoming more defined. I could now make out not just a head and shoulders, but arms as well. Hands pressing against the barrier. "It's already here," Josh whispered. "Don't you understand? It's been waiting for me to acknowledge it." I fumbled for my phone, desperate to document what was happening. The camera app opened, but the screen showed only static when pointed at the window. Each time I tried to capture an image, my phone grew hotter until it became painful to hold. Josh began documenting everything in a small notebook he pulled from his pocket, his handwriting growing increasingly erratic with each sentence. "The reflection moves independently," he wrote. "Has agency? Purpose? It wants something?" Days passed. We stopped leaving the apartment. The covered window became the center of our existence. Took turns sleeping, always making sure someone was watching the increasingly defined shape behind the sheet. The bulge had continued to grow more pronounced, the fabric stretching to its limits. The apartment changed around us. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in rhythm with the thing behind the sheet. Mirrors throughout the home began showing delays, reflections moving a fraction of a second too late, as if considering whether to follow our movements. Water from the faucets ran cold, no matter how long we let it flow, and it carried that same earthy scent that had first appeared when the window revealed its impossible reflection. Electronic devices malfunctioned constantly, playing fragments of conversations we'd never had. Josh deteriorated faster than I did. He stopped sleeping entirely, his eyes fixed on the covered window. "It's not just my reflection," he confessed one night, his voice barely audible. "It's something else, using my reflection as a doorway." I didn't want to believe him, but the evidence was becoming harder to deny. The air around the window had developed a strange quality, distorted like heat waves rising from hot pavement, but cold to the touch. Photos on nearby walls showed subtle changes each morning. Subjects slightly repositioned, expressions a bit darker. "We need to uncover it," Josh said eventually. "Face it directly." I protested, but his mind was made up. With trembling hands, he approached the sheet-covered window. I noticed his movements had become synchronized with the shape behind the fabric. They swayed in perfect unison, mirror images despite the barrier between them. "Whatever comes through," he instructed me, "document everything. Someone needs to know what happened here." With one swift motion, he yanked the sheet away. The window revealed not glass, but a liquid-like surface that rippled outward from a central point. And there, standing with its back to us, was Josh. Or something wearing Josh like a costume that didn't quite fit. The Josh beside me gasped. The Josh in the window remained motionless for one breathless moment, then slowly, deliberately, began to turn around. I lunged forward, trying to replace the sheet to restore the barrier, but my hands passed through the fabric as if it had become insubstantial. Josh reached out toward his doppelganger, his fingertips nearly touching the rippling surface. "Don't," I started, but it was too late. As his fingers made contact with the window, the surface tension broke. Liquid glass flowed around his hand up his arm, enveloping him in silvery, reflective material. He didn't scream, didn't struggle, just watched with fascination as his body became a mirror. And in that mirror, I saw not my own reflection, but the back of my head, unmoving. As I tilted my head, the figure in the glass didn't follow, just stood there. Then its shoulders twitched, moving slightly closer to the glass. I understand now why Josh couldn't look away. why he felt compelled to document everything. The window isn't just a window. The reflection isn't just a reflection. Something ancient that feeds on recognition. On the moment of horrified understanding when you realize what you're seeing isn't bound by the laws of physics, I write this account in Josh's abandoned notebook, adding to his frantic observations. My reflection watches from every reflective surface, always showing my back, regardless of how I position myself, always moving slightly closer when I blink. The window remains uncovered. The liquid glass has hardened again, but something has fundamentally changed in its nature. Sometimes I catch glimpses of Josh within its depths, his mouth moving in words I cannot hear. I know I should leave, should run as far as possible, but each time I try, my reflection takes another step closer. And I fear what will happen when it finally reaches the glass, when it finally turns around. So I wait and I watch and I document everything. And sometimes, when the light hits the window just right, see not just one figure with its back turned, but dozens, stretching into infinity, all of them moving closer, one imperceptible step at a time. Story 4: I should never have opened that door. The light switch in the garage had flickered that morning as I sorted through the remnants of my grandmother's life, boxing what remained of her possessions. A weak yellow bulb swayed from a frayed cord, casting long shadows across stacked cardboard boxes and forgotten tools rusting in corners. The air tasted of dust and motor oil, clinging to the back of my throat with each breath. That's when I noticed it. A door I'd never seen before. Small and unassuming, painted the same faded gray as the surrounding wall. Had it always been there, hidden behind the tall metal shelving unit I just moved? The doorknob was cold brass, tarnished black around the edges as if burned. When I turned it, the hinges didn't squeak. They should have squeaked. In an old house? Like this, shouldn't they? Instead, the door swung open with an almost eager silence. Inside was darkness, but not empty darkness. My eyes adjusted slowly, revealing a small room no larger than a modest closet. Chains hung from the ceiling, dozens of them. Rusted iron links suspended from hooks bolted into the concrete above. They swayed in perfect unison, despite the stillness of the air, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, marked with strange patterns in the dust. Long drag marks created trails that all led toward the center of the room, as if something heavy had been pulled across the floor repeatedly, or someone, my hand still gripped the doorknob fingernails, digging into my palm. The chains continued their gentle, impossible sway. Stepped back and closed the door firmly. The latch clicked with finality. I should have left then, should have called someone, anyone. Instead, I pressed my ear against the door. The muffled sound of metal against metal continued, chains clinking together in quiet percussion. That night, lying in my grandmother's old bed, I told myself what anyone would. The chains moved because of air currents I couldn't feel, hidden vents or gaps in the foundation, allowing subtle drafts. The drag marks were probably from stored items recently removed. My mind filled with rational explanations as I drifted. To sleep, I dreamed of chains wrapping around my ankles. Morning arrived with pale light through faded curtains. My first thought was of the door, the room, the chains. Before coffee or breakfast, I returned to the garage, half expecting the door to have vanished overnight. It hadn't. If anything, it seemed more prominent, more solid against the wall. When I opened it this time, I brought my phone for light. The chains hung motionless now, but still there, still numerous 37 of them, I counted. The room smelled wrong, like copper and something acrid that burned my nostrils. The drag marks in the dust seemed deeper, more defined. I stepped inside. The concrete felt unnaturally cold through the soles of my shoes. Each chain ended at a different height, some nearly touching the floor, others suspended at waist level. From my position in the doorway, they formed an almost perfect circle around. The center of the room. Hello? My voice sounded flat, absorbed by the walls without echo. My phone light caught something carved into the concrete wall opposite the door. Stepping closer, careful not to touch any chains, I examined the markings. Names. Dozens of names. Etched into the wall with something sharp. Some looked fresh, others worn with age. The last name listed was Margaret, my grandmother's name. I backed away, bumping into a chain behind me. It was warm to the touch, unlike the cold metal it appeared to be. The link swayed at my contact, but not normally. The movement continued, far longer than physics should allow, building momentum rather than losing it. Soon, all the chains moved in unison again, a hypnotic pendulum dance. A noise from behind startled me, the door swinging closed on its own. I lunged for it, wedging my foot in the narrowing gap. The pressure against my shoe was immense, as if something pushed with determination from the other side. With effort, I forced it open and stumbled back into the garage, slamming the door shut behind me. My hands trembled as I examined my phone. The photos I'd taken of the room showed nothing but darkness, as if the light refused to capture what existed inside. That evening, I found myself researching the house's history. My grandmother had lived here for 50 years, since before I was born. The property records showed the house was built atop land that once held something else, though details were frustratingly vague. References to a community facility appeared. In older documents, though none specified its purpose, sleep came fitfully that night. I woke frequently to what sounded like faint metallic tapping at my bedroom window. When morning finally arrived, exhaustion had settled deep in my bones. I found a carpenter's pencil in a kitchen drawer and marked the door with a small X in the corner. Then I moved the metal shelving unit back in front of it, concealing it entirely from view. Out of sight, out of mind. I continued sorting through boxes, determined to finish packing before darkness fell again. When I returned from loading my car, the shelving unit had moved just slightly, a few inches to the left, but enough to reveal the edge of the door. The X I'd drawn was gone. My heart raced as I approached it. The wood felt warm beneath my fingertips, almost feverish. I pressed my ear against it and heard something new, a rhythmic scraping like fingernails against concrete. I should have left. Instead, I opened the door again. The chains now hung motionless, but differently positioned. Where before they had formed a circle, they now created a path leading to the wall with the names. The drag marks on the floor had changed, two fresher, wider, wetter. When I shone my light on the wall, a new name had been added below my grandmother's. My name, carved deeply into the concrete, still dusted with fresh powder. A sound behind me metal dragging across concrete. I turned to find the chains nearest the door rising slowly, link by link, as if pulled by invisible hands. They twisted in the air, forming shapes that resembled human limbs, a torso, a neck. The door slammed shut. I ran toward it, but chains snaked around my ankles, warm and pulsing with unnatural life. My screams echoed against the concrete as I was dragged toward the center of the room. The phone fell from my hand, its light spinning crazily across the walls before going dark. The chains whispered as they moved, a chorus of voices speaking words just beyond comprehension. I caught fragments, promises, pleas, warnings, all overlapping in metallic harmony. With desperate strength, I kicked free and scrambled toward the door. Chains lashed at my back. My fingernails broke against the wood as I clawed at it. Finding the knob at last and twisting with all my might, it opened. I fell into the garage, gasping. Looking back, the room appeared normal, chains hanging still, no sign of movement. But across the concrete floor stretched a single new drag. Mark, from the center of the room to where I now lay. My clothing was torn, my skin beneath scratched and bruised in perfect chain link patterns. I sealed the house that day, leaving everything behind. Let someone else sort through the boxes. Let someone else discover what hides behind that door. I drove until the familiar became strange, until I could breathe without smelling rust and copper. But every night since then, I wake to the sound of chains gently swaying. My skin grows warm where they touched me, phantom links wrapping tighter with each passing day. Inmers, I sometimes glimpse marks forming on my back, patterns like names being slowly etched into my flesh. And sometimes in the empty rooms of my new home, I find doors I don't remember, small, unassuming doors, painted to match the surrounding walls. I haven't opened one, not yet, okay, but sometimes when I press my ear against them, I hear my name being whispered by voices that sound like metal links sliding against concrete. I know what waits for me inside. Know that eventually I'll open. 1. The chains are patient. They have always been patient. And they know my name. Story 5. Emma checked herself in the mirror before heading out.
Out.
Her reflection stared back, but her eyes were red, cheeks wet with tears. She reached up to touch her face. Mouth slightly open, as if about to speak. I stood frozen, my hand still pressed against my cheek. The cold sensation of my skin contrasted with the warm tears streaming down my reflection's face. This had to be some trick of the light, a smudge on the glass, perhaps. I wiped the mirror with my sleeve, but nothing changed. The weeping woman remained, her shoulders now beginning to tremble with silent sobs. "What do you want?" I whispered, my voice barely audible even to myself. My reflection didn't respond with words. Instead, she raised her hand and placed it against the glass. Despite my better judgment, I found myself mirroring the action, pressing my palm against hers. The surface felt unusually cold, almost damp, like morning dew on grass. A wave of sadness washed over me, so intense and sudden that my knees weakened. Grief, not my own, flooded my consciousness. I pulled my hand away as if burned, stumbling backward until my legs hit the edge of my bed. The woman in the mirror had stopped crying. Now she watched me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. When I moved right, she moved left, not mirroring me anymore, but acting independently. When I took a step forward, she remained still. This couldn't be happening. I closed my eyes, counted to 10 in my mind, and opened them again. The reflection had returned to normal, copying my movements perfectly. I exhaled in relief, convinced it had been a momentary hallucination caused by stress or lack of sleep. I decided to continue with my day, but hesitated before leaving my bedroom. Something pulled at the corner of my mind, a vague unease I couldn't place. I glanced at the mirror once more. Everything seemed normal, yet somehow wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. At work, I found it difficult to concentrate. Images of my weeping reflection kept intruding into my thoughts. During my lunch break, I used my phone's camera to check my appearance. For a split second, I thought I saw tears in the digital reflection. But when I looked again, everything appeared normal. That evening, I covered all the mirrors in my apartment with sheets. The rational part of my brain argued this was ridiculous. But another part, deeper and more primitive, felt relieved once their reflective surfaces were hidden from view. Sleep came fitfully that night. Dreams of glass and water and faces that weren't quite mine wove through my subconscious. I woke to darkness, my body drenched in sweat. Soft sound reached my ears, something like gentle weeping. I fumbled for the lamp switch. Light flooded the room, revealing nothing unusual. The sheets covering my mirrors remained in place, yet the sound persisted, just at the edge of audibility. I followed it to the bathroom. The sheet covering the bathroom mirror had fallen or been pulled to the floor. The surface gleamed in the darkness, a rectangle of deeper black. With trembling fingers, I flipped the light switch. My reflection wasn't crying anymore. She was smiling. "Who are you?" I demanded, surprisingly steady despite my racing heart. The smile widened. She raised one finger to her lips in a shushing gesture, then pointed behind me. I refused to look, keeping my eyes fixed on the mirror. "Tell me what you want," I insisted. Her mouth began to move, forming words I couldn't hear. I leaned closer, straining to understand. The mirror's surface fogged with my breath, obscuring her face. When the condensation cleared, she was gone. replaced by my own terrified expression. I spent the next day researching mirror phenomena. Most explanations referenced pareidolia or visual processing disorders. None mentioned reflections that acted independently or conveyed emotions not felt by the viewer. That night, I set up my phone to record the bathroom mirror while I slept. The next morning, I reviewed the footage with shaking hands. For hours, nothing happened. Then, at what must have been deep night, a figure appeared in the mirror not my reflection, but a woman who looked similar, yet distinctly different. She stood motionless for several minutes before raising her hand and pressing it against the glass from her side. Then, the recording became distorted, pixelated shapes. Moving across the screen until the video ended abruptly, I began documenting everything. I took photographs of mirrors before and after strange occurrences, recorded audio when the weeping sounds emerged from nowhere, and kept a detailed journal of my experiences. The more evidence I gathered, the more real it all became. The woman appeared with increasing frequency, sometimes crying, sometimes smiling, sometimes just watching with an expression of profound sorrow. She began leaving messages, words that appeared in the foggy mirror after my shower. Gone too quickly to photograph but burned into my memory. Help me find it, remember? What was I supposed to remember? What was I meant to find? One morning, I noticed something peculiar about my reflection. A thin, red line had appeared across her my throat. I touched my own neck, feeling nothing unusual, no pain or wound. Yet there it was in the mirror, a delicate scarlet thread. The line grew darker over subsequent days. My reflection's eyes became increasingly desperate. The weeping returned, but now accompanied by silent screams, mouth open wide in a rictus of agony. Sleep became nearly impossible. When exhaustion finally claimed me, nightmares waited, dreams of water filling my lungs, of glass shards in my throat, of hands reaching, through mirrors, to drag me into darkness. I started avoiding reflective surfaces altogether. I covered not just mirrors, but windows, metal appliances, even the screen of my phone. My colleagues commented on my appearance, the dark circles under my eyes, my unwashed hair, the way I flinched at unexpected movements. One night, delirious from lack of sleep, I uncovered the bathroom mirror. My reflection wasn't there. Instead, I saw what looked like a room similar to my bathroom, but subtly different. The woman stood in the center, no longer crying, but looking at me with something like hope. She held up a piece of paper with writing. Too small to read, I stepped closer. The words became clear. The box under the floorboard. I knew immediately what she meant. When I'd moved into this apartment, I discovered a loose floorboard in the closet, but never investigated further. With adrenaline coursing through my veins, I rushed to the closet, pulled away the carpet, and pried up the wooden plank. A small metal box lay hidden in the darkness. My hands trembled as I lifted it out and snapped open the rusted latch. Inside lay a stack of photographs, yellowed with age. The top image showed a young woman, the same woman from the mirror, smiling at the camera, standing in this very apartment. I flipped through the photographs. The woman with friends. The woman alone. The woman with a man whose face had been scratched. Out in every picture, the final photograph made my blood freeze. The woman lying on the bathroom floor, eyes vacant, a dark line across her throat. On the back, someone had written, "Emma, forgive me. My name, my face, but not my life, not my memories." I returned to the bathroom mirror. The woman Emma waited, her expression gentle now. "Who am I?" I whispered. I didn't answer, but raised her hand to the glass once more. This time, when I pressed my palm against hers, the surface yielded like water. Our fingers touched, intertwined, and a flood of memories cascaded through me, her memories. I remembered everything now. The jealousy, the argument, the knife. Remembered watching the life fade from Emma's eyes, my eyes. I remembered taking her identity, living in her apartment, becoming her, while her real self was trapped somewhere between worlds. In the mirror, Emma's image began to change, features shifting until I recognized my original face, the face of the woman who had killed her and stolen her life. The mirror's surface hardened suddenly, trapping my hand on the other side. I pulled desperately, but couldn't break free. The glass began to liquefy around my arm, drawing me inexorably forward. I screamed as my face touched the cold, fluid surface. As it enveloped my head, my shoulders pulling me through into darkness. My eyes adjusted gradually. I stood in a bathroom identical to the one I'd just left, but reversed, behind me. Mirror showed the empty bathroom I had been in moments before. On the counter lay a newspaper. The headline caught my attention. Local woman missing, foul play suspected. My photograph, my real photograph, stared back at me. A noise from beyond the bathroom door made me turn. Footsteps approached. The doorknob turned slowly. In the mirror. Behind me, I could see my reflection smiling. But this time, it wasn't my face. It was Emma's. She raised one finger to her lips in a shushing gesture as the bathroom door began to open. And for the first time since this began, I was the one who started to cry.